This workshop is a collaboration among 4 European projects from the network, more specifically from the Resilience 22 and 24 clusters. The projects are DESIDERATA, Planets, SSbD4CheM and SUNRISE, with Planets acting as the leading project for this workshop. The underlying idea of the workshop is that not all innovation scenarios in SMEs and large industries are the same. SSbD assessment and decision-making is always influenced by the innovation context, and therefore these decisions are undertaken on a case-by-case basis for different innovation scenarios. Our first workshop earlier this year described the concept of SSbD scenario by aspects of novelty, exposure, severity, sustainability, scope, and immediacy. And this was illustrated by different case studies provided from projects and real industrial partners. The concept of scenario was ever since integrated by the Joint Research Center in the revised SSbD framework, where it serves as bridge between the SSbD scoping and the tailored safety and sustainability assessment. In the SSbD framework, a scenario was described as a specific and real set of conditions that define the context in which the SSbD assessment is performed. In this second workshop, we'll explore tailoring rules that respect both the SSbD scoping and the economic context. The goal of this so-called tailoring is to improve the competitiveness of the innovator by supporting tiered and prioritized SSbD assessments. The discussion will be facilitated by case studies exemplifying archetypical SSbD scenarios where we'll attempt the tailoring using a dedicated Excel tool. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the agenda. The next presentation is Introduction to the Methodology by Wendel Wolleben from the large chemical company BASF. Then we break for discussion in breakout groups. There will be 4 breakout groups, each providing a case study from the projects DESIDERATA, Planets, SSbD4CheM and SUNRISE. Then we come back and we report the outcomes of the breakout groups. And after a short break, we'll hear reflections from our colleagues from the Joint Research Center, more specifically Ransu from the Joint Research Center will provide the reflection. And then we have the final feedback and plenary discussion moderated by Leah Hernandez from RIBM. Leah will also provide the outlook for future development. With this, I conclude my short introduction and I pass the floor to Wendel to introduce the methodology that we adopt in the workshop in more detail. Wendel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. So it's my pleasure to introduce you in the next 20-25 minutes into the methodology that we will use. And it's important to note that we try to advance, but it doesn't let me. Now it works. It's important to note that since the last workshop, as Daniel already said, the term of the SSbD scenario has also been now better defined in the glossary by JSC. I won't read it again because Daniel has reproduced it already. And you can see also in this illustration how we envision that bridge between the planning of the project to the implementation of a project. And that's exactly what Gate 3 does. Gate 3 takes the decision to stop a project or to start a project. And we entirely agree with the glossary provided by JSC. We would just add that also the economic context is to be considered. And so today we will explore a methodology that tries to consider both the aspects, the context from the scoping and the context from a project management perspective. So how do we do this? Beatrice, I cannot advance slides, I think. Sorry for that. I'm trying to. It does not let me. It worked just 10 minutes ago. That's what they always say, but we tested it.
Don't worry, I take it over. Just let me know when I share, when I have to change.
Okay, thank you. So what you see on the screen now is the result of the first workshop that we held in June. You see the headlines just mentioned by Daniel now filled with more specific aspects that describe the novelty, that describe exposure, etc. And that was revised as a result of the first workshop. So for instance, on the lower left, the objective of the innovation, or in other words, the value proposition, has been shaped clearer because you can have different objectives. You can maybe generate something that fulfills the same purpose as an old material, is just a bit cheaper. But maybe you want to develop something that is safer or more sustainable or more performant or just better integrated, more customized to downstream systems. And I won't read all of them, but you will see that we try to combine aspects from business case and SSbD scoping, and that is published on the Zenodo you see down here. Today, we will focus on just a few of them to get us started, to make it as simple as possible. Next slide, please. Which are shown here by red frames. We will focus on the novelty, the objective or value proposition, the sector of use, the R&D budget, and the immediacy represented by the time to market. Because we believe that these information pieces are certainly known by each innovator when she or he approaches Gate 3. Everyone will know this. Otherwise, you wouldn't dare to start a project. And so, how do we use that? Next slide, please. We combine the information we have on the novelty, whether it's incremental or an advanced innovation, with the objective. And we use this to derive the goal for the maturity of SSbD that's needed. And then on the right-hand side, you see that we combine the objective, again, with the sector of use to estimate the SSbD pull by lifecycle actors. Because we all know that the value created by SSbD has to be recognized by the value chain so that they are more favorable for that kind of innovation instead of the old technology that was there before. Next slide, please. More specifically, we now provide initial guidance for this assessment. So for instance, if you have incremental novelty, I'm on the box on the left now. Our experience from industry is that in most cases of incremental innovation, low maturity of SSbD is quite acceptable to lifecycle actors. They don't demand for more. Instead, for something that is disruptive, one should strive for at least medium maturity, of course, using tiering and prioritization, because people appreciate it. They want to see proof that the advanced material or the disruptive technology is really okay. And so here, the objective of having something that's safer than before adds value to that SSbD assessment, so that we propose, even for an incremental case, if your objective is safer or more sustainable, also in that case, go from low to medium maturity, and likewise go from
missing
medium
Wendel's
to
speech.
high.
Oh, that was my most favorite industry person.
Sorry, for the people that are not presenting, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Wendell, continue.
Thank you. I'm now on the right-hand side. So we may discuss this today in the case studies, and that's why we do the workshop. But our initial assumption is that we have some high pull sectors like cosmetics, foods, agrochemicals, pharma also could be added. We have some medium pull sectors like textiles, food contact, home care, biocides, and some that typically on average don't care so much, and that is construction, electronics, automotive, where performance is and cost performance is in many times more important than sustainability. So in these cases, again, we say that if the objective is to develop something that's safer than before, you want to prove it. And so you should expect a higher SSbD pull, low to medium or medium to high, if that objective is not just cheaper, but safer or more sustainable. So that's how we combine the basic information given. Next slide, please. And in the simplest case now, we have all information also from the R&D budget and the immediacy. And next slide, please. We may even know the expected commercial value. So the business expectation, net present value, future income, market development, at least for a higher innovation maturity, that information is typically there. And then we can use a numerical approach that you all will play with in the case studies. And that is an Excel spreadsheet that we provide for this purpose. Next slide, please. This Excel integrates the SSbD aspects into the very well established commercial metric of expected commercial value. And there are a few boundary conditions that, of course, SSbD add costs to a project. So click once, please. It means that out of an existing innovation budget for a company, each individual project gets bigger. And so in total, there are fewer projects. The number N of projects that can be performed is reduced. But also, SSbD has an impact by increasing the probability of success, because, at least in some cases, as we just hypothesized, our value chain partners will appreciate this. And then we will use tiering, that means discounting, because we shift costs to later points in the project. And so that reduces the weight, the cost on the ECV. And of course, if each individual project gets more valuable, the total pipeline again can also become more valuable. And this is what we call return on investment. That although we increase cost for each project, the value of the total pipeline should increase. That's the goal of our economic argumentation on SSbD. Next slide, please. Now this looks frightening, but that's why we will have time to explore this in the case study breakouts. This Excel, click once please, is also available on Zenodo. It is a result of the industry people from Planets that are all listed here as authors. Some of them also again present today in the breakout sessions. And you can see it uses a stage gate logic from top gate 2 to bottom gate 5. You specify in column D the budgets. You specify the budget for the technical development, technical costs of R&D, so synthesis, characterization, performance testing, and then you play with the number of alternatives that you want to screen by SSbD methods. For instance, initially by a simplified LCA, maybe later on by a more elaborate single actor LCA, or even by a multi-actor LCA at later points. Likewise, for safety screenings, this spreadsheet assumes that there are costs associated, and they multiply by the number of versions and the number of endpoints that you wish to explore. And as a result, it tells you at the very bottom, the 5% green box here, in that case, the return on investment by implementing SSbD. And it's based on assumptions, of course. Like we just said, it uses exactly the numbers that I just presented, specifically the positive or negative impact for a certain sector that will appreciate or not appreciate the SSbD implementation. The next slide specifies those initial assumptions, how it impacts the ECV. So this formula is textbook strategic controlling. It's very well established. And you see here, click once please, we have trade-offs, because by taking a compromise between safety and sustainability and cost and performance, we may reduce the probability of technical success, so of achieving the technical performance specifications. This is an effect of SSbD push. Click once, please. We also add costs, because like I just said, performing an LCA, performing NAM testing comes at a cost. Click once, please. And the good thing here is, and this is where we see the benefits of the SSbD approach, is that we improve the probability of commercial success if our customers, our downstream partners, are willing to prefer that product over another product developed without SSbD approaches. So that is the SSbD pull that is absolutely essential, and that turns the return on investment into positive in the end. Next slide, please. And click once or twice, please. Initially, we provide numerical values now for the modulation of the probability of technical success by performing SSbD. For an incremental innovation, you have a relatively narrow design space. You know what to expect. You may even know the trends if you change numbers by a few percent in this or another direction. And so here we assume only a minus 10% decrease by the compromises you take, by the trade-offs. And you will see that this number is not fixed in the Excel. You can change it. So use your knowledge of your value chain, of your technology, to change this number. But for a disruptive case, we would assume as a starting assumption that you have a minus 30% decrease of the probability of technical success. Because you have a wider design space, the risk is higher of landing in some local optimum where the compromise is good between safety, sustainability, and performance and cost. But you may not reach the technical specifications of performance alone. And then at the bottom, you see our initial assumptions. And again, It's up to you to change it in the breakouts and to tell us what else you would perceive as more appropriate for that specific case. So we assume that we have about a 50% probability of commercial success for an incremental innovation and 25% for disruptive innovation. These numbers are not out of the blue. I know that for BASF, we have tables that provide examples and tell people in words what to assume for the technical probability of success and for the commercial probability of success. It's those numbers that we use here. Other companies may have slightly different assumptions, or some cases may be different. And again, that's up for you to change it. The most important point is the SSbD pull. Will your customers, or the customers in that specific case, provide a high SSbD pull, which here we propose to model by a 50% increase of that probability by SSbD. But also, there will be many cases, and we know it from our discussions in industry, where there's only 5% or even none. And that is to be considered also. There are value chains that are mostly driven by cost. And so there may be cases that see a low SSbD pull. Next slide, please. Here you also see the assumptions for the cost of performing an LCA, single actor or multi-actor, or the cost on average of performing a NAM testing. And again, you can change it because it depends on the local cost of labor, of course. But that's also why the result tells you the percent budget increase so that it already calibrates to the local cost of labor. Next slide, please. Here's an example to show how tailoring then works. And we have a baseline scenario where we include reach, of course, because that's a requirement, but no SSbD because it's not mandatory. So we have €0 budget increase, and we have a 100% baseline of the number of projects funded. And you see that we have 100,000 development costs assumed and 150,000 commercialization costs. So that example is a relatively moderate budget. So it's more an incremental innovation. We assume it to be a high SSbD pull because it's the textile sector. So initially starting point, medium sensitivity to SSbD, but the objective being more sustainable together gives us the high SSbD pull assumption. So we use that, and now we estimate the tiered SSbD up to high maturity, testing several alternatives for 2 endpoints, performing single and multi-actor LCA. That adds costs of 230,000, which means the number of projects overall that can be funded reduces to 52%. And although you see at the bottom the expected commercial volume increases from 4.8 million to 6.4 million, which is nice, the return on investment is negative because in order to achieve this, we have increased the budget of the project so much that on average, in the probabilistic assessment of the entire innovation pipeline, we test fewer ideas and we bring less successful products to the market. And so we now start tailoring, and I'm not going through the details now. We reduce the number of NAM testing. We skip the multi-actor LCA. Costs reduced to 150K. It's already better, minus 12% return on investment. And in the end, we have a really lean assumption. One alternative tested in NAMs for the one endpoint that is most important here, performing single actor LCA. That works. That is a positive return on investment. Now you will all explore different cases, and we'll come to that in a second. So the exact tiering and tailoring that you use will look different, but that's exactly the purpose of today's workshop. Next slide, please. Because Not always people will have all the detailed information as we just used, knowing or assuming the future incomes, the net present value, the entire business case. So for a lower innovation maturity, which may be more and gate 2 assessment, or maybe a less ripe innovation also, you may compare to existing scenarios. And this is what we call scenario archetypes. You compare to a case that looks similar in those key aspects, the type of innovation, the objective, and the sector of use, to your specific case. So the cases of today's workshop, after successful tailoring, may serve in future as archetypes for innovators to compare to. Next slide, please. And click once or twice. The first, click one more, please. The first case that in preparation of this workshop, and that's a hypothetical case that is not in today's case studies, is a scenario we call A. It's a big project, 1 million euros per year, relatively long time to launch, 5 years to launch, being disruptive, aiming to be safer than before, going into a sector that is sensitive, such as agrochemicals, cosmetics, or food. In that case, we recommend a high SSbD maturity, and we assume a high SSbD pull by lifecycle actors. So you see, this is the luxury case. A big project, our customers really love it, and we have then also the ability, based on the economic consideration I just presented, to increase the budget by 8%, which means 80,000 euros per year. And it's also written there how a tailored approach could look like. 5 versions of the innovative material tested in 5 NAMs, doing simplified LCA, at a later point coming back with higher tier testing of safety aspects and performing multi-actor LCA. So this is a nicely tiered approach up to high SSbD maturity. Click once, please. Not all the scenarios that we explored in preparation of this workshop offer such a wide range of budget increase, because some of them may go into sectors that are simply less interested so far in aspects of safety and sustainability. And others are maybe incremental, especially scenarios D, E, F. Incremental innovation often comes with a more limited budget, maybe only in scenario D, 125 euros per 1,000 euros per year, only 2 years to launch. Depending on the sector, it may still make a lot of sense to add 18% to the budget, which means 23,000 euros per year. I'm still in scenario D here. But 23,000 euros is less than the 80,000 that we had in scenario A. So a stronger tailoring, stronger prioritization is required. And there may be cases, and specifically I want to highlight scenario E, an incremental innovation that claims to go into a safer design space, but the assessment here says there is no economic value. Either you revise the objective or you completely change the business model, because it just doesn't make sense to claim that something is safer if you cannot prove it, and with that limited budget you can't prove it. This assessment can have important messages to gate 3 decision makers to either go ahead or not. Next slide, please. The case studies. We have 4 cases, and you see the first one is provided by the Planet project. It's an industry case, incremental novelty, the objective being cost performance into the sector of use construction. So if you're personally interested in some of those keywords, please choose that breakout in a minute from now. The other case from DESIDERATA is an SME that is the innovator in this case. It's disruptive. The objective is to be more sustainable than what was established before. And again, it goes into construction, although a different application than the other case. Case number 3 is from the SSbD4CheM project. It's an industry innovator where the novelty is maybe something in between. It's about nanocellulose, which in itself is maybe not so new anymore, but it is very different from what the conventional material was used before. The objective is, I would say, mainly compliance to replace banned beads, and goes into cosmetics. So if you're interested in the cosmetics sector or the other keywords here, go to that case, please. And finally, we have the SUNRISE case. It's an SME innovator again, a disruptive technology that has the goal to be safer and more performant than the previous application, and goes into food sectors. So please make your choices of which case study you're most interested in. Next slide highlights the experts that very kindly agreed to be your discussion partners here. So you see Olga from the Monolithus company will present the DESIDERATA case. Tobias Moss from Budenheim will present the planets case. Andrej Panak will present the SSbD4CheM case. And Maria will present the SUNRISE case. All of them have had a good time to prepare the basis for the case studies. So we thank all of them already here. Please make your decision, because Beatrice, I think now you will open the breakouts.
Wendel, do you want to explain this slide first, or I just open?
Oh, sorry for that. These are your leading questions for the breakouts. Each breakout has a moderator, specifically Carla Caldera, Martin Himli, Daniel Christosov, and Leah Hernandez. They will guide the discussion, and they will try to guide it towards the leading questions shown here. So they will invite you to explore the tailoring, to vary the number of alternatives, etc., to try shifting costs to the launch phase, etc. We would like to know at the end, for your case, that you will explore what maturity of SSbD was economically supported. Maybe if one of your cases looked similar to the draft archetypes in the table A to F that I just presented, or is your case so different we should add it as an archetype? And please comment also on the initial assumptions that I just explained and that are contained in very short in the Excel that you will be using. How should we improve guidance? All of this is very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, now as Wendel announced, I will open the rooms. Theoretically, you should be randomly assigned to one of the rooms. If, for example, you are super interested in the cosmetics case study, but you are assigned to the DESIDERATA, you should be able to change the room. Feel free to do it, but please do it quickly so that the breakouts can come further with the program. And we should all join here at 2:30. So at 2:30, I will close the rooms and we will join again here in the plenary. Then here we go. One thing, if you are not able to come back to the plenary, just leave the whole call and join again via the link that you use for joining. The rooms should be now open. You should be able to see a button to join one of the rooms. Just join them.
We are now going to be going through the moderators of the 4 different breakout rooms. Carla is one of them, not here yet, but I see Leah already here. And maybe we start with DESIDERATA. It's a very early letter in the alphabet anyway. Are you going to share a slide or something yourself? All right.
We have several slides, and I'm just going to do it in a duo with Olga because I think it's more efficient that she herself. So we're going to go through the different.
But still give it until the others are back as well. You can
just let me know.
Maybe you already start your sharing your slides.
And then I wait. Just let me know when I should start asking Olga questions.
Okay. Beatrice, am I correct that people have come back?
I hope so. I still see some people in the plenaries, in the breakout rooms, but these can be just maybe because they are
maybe you just kind of close the rooms.
They are already closed. They are already closed.
Good. So let's give the word to Leah and to Olga, presenting as moderators from the breakout in the DESIDERATA case.
Okay, so so maybe Olga, just give one very short, maybe 2-sentence recap of your case study on geopolymers. Maybe that would help others to really want to go into further to these questions.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Olga, and I represent the Monolithos and DESIDERATA project, and more specifically, use case 5, where we developed porous geopolymers with insulation properties, aiming to adopt an SSbD framework where we will replace aluminum, which is the, let's say, benchmark, one of the ingredients used as benchmark, and we aim to replace it with some bio-based surfactants.
Thank you, Olga. So maybe you can walk us through the maturity of the SSbD and if it's economically supported by your case study. That was the first question.
Yes, and as we discussed also in the room, it is a mid-maturity SSbD level. That is what our case can economically support. And we aim to focus on the analytics, as we mentioned, the LCA analysis in the different levels of the production process, and we need also to take into consideration that we are referring to a low exposure material. So an extensive, let's say, SSbD testing program would not be proportionate for our material.
Perfect. If we move to the next question, is your case study similar to one of the draft archetypes? I think we decided that it was archetype B, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the archetype.
Yes, our case matches a construction substitution archetype where we place aluminum powder, which is considered a high-risk material, with, of course, safer alternatives that are also bio-based, while we do not compromise the final properties of the resulting material that is aimed to be used in the construction sector. So we think that it would be useful to be used as an archetype for similar SMEs or other stakeholders that may be implemented to similar processes.
Thank you. If we go to the next question, can you comment on the initial assumptions provided and any suggestions to improve the guidance? And the first,
yes.
And I think the first question was assumptions are logical, but guidance can improve. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, that is your answer.
Please. Yes, let me, for example, mention that in many cases, the SMEs are not aware of the effort and the testing that is necessary to be performed based only on the novelty. So we need to take various parameters into consideration and have a practical reference. For example, that in our case, it is a solid, a low hazard material.
Please, for
Sorry?
people that are not talking, mute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, so that is practically a few practical points would be helpful in order to evaluate the level of effort that needs to be paid.
Thank you. And I think we only have one. Any suggestions on the sector-specific pool by downstream actors?
Yes, as we all know, in the construction sector, it is important, of course, what it is inside the material, absolutely. But in many cases, we all know that most clients do not, let's say, analyze all the different compounds or ingredients that are included in this type of construction materials. It is very important, however, of course, depending on the application and the client, to have a certification of CO2 efficiency of the process, or to be compliant with specific regulations if it is for a specific application. So it is important to have an, let's say, tangible estimation of the different properties of the material. So, for example, having standards for durability or carbon performance or circularity that is implemented from the specific material, it is very important and can be pulled by the downstream actors.
Okay, thanks a lot for reporting back from this breakout room and case.
Thanks.
And I guess we continue with another case from the construction sector, which has been provided by the Planets project. And I would ask Carla, and maybe also by help of Tobias from Budenheim, to present what they were discussing about and how well they fit into archetype that they have pre-selected and what specific observations they made when running through the Excel sheet.
Okay, so we were very educational in our breakout room. So we went to the Excel and see all the inputs. So we had some nice discussion. And then regarding the maturity of the SSbD, it is maybe before Tobias, maybe you can give a summary of the case study. Not everyone knows, sorry.
Yeah, so the idea was to compare two cases for an incremental change in the flame retardant formulation. In the one case, we don't have an SSbD pull, and in the other one, we have a strong pull due to regulation. And the outcome was that the SSbD pull has a huge impact on the return of invest. So if the regulation requires a change in the formulation, we had a positive return of invest. And in the case that there's no regulation need, then we had a strong negative return of invest.
And then regarding the maturity, we saw that there was a low maturity also because it's an incremental project. And regarding the archetypes, Tobias, you mentioned between D and E, right?
Exactly. So in the case that we don't have an SSbD pull with a strong negative return of invest, we are more in the area of the archetype E. Whereas if we have a SSbD pull, then we are more in the archetype D.
Yes, and then regarding the assumptions, we had discussed some of the parameters like the the pool that influences technical probability of success. So there were some different opinions but that was a discussion. And so maybe if then we have some feedback, you can also send us via email. I don't know, Tobias, if you want to add something on the guidance and the assumptions that we have in the Excel.
Yeah, as Carla mentioned, we discussed a little bit the assumptions we've made, and the outcome was clearly that it really needs to be tailored to your case, and that the percentages or the values we gave should be just a guideline or a support to find the right values. But at the end, it needs to be really tailored to your case. And in this case, for example, the recommendation for an incremental change is 5% for the SSbD push. But in this case, we put a very higher value in, because we always have to make a trade-off if we exchange one of the components in the formulation.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any other kind of remarks from the breakout room? If not, thanks a lot for these cases from the construction sector. Tailoring was mentioned a lot. Let's come now to the next case, which was the case that was discussed in the breakout room where I was. And I would ask maybe Ondrej to very quickly, in 20 seconds or something, inform on what the case was to the plenum. Ondrej Panak from the National Institute of Chemistry in Slovenia, and the case was provided by Ahava DESI Laboratories on a nanocellulose cosmetic.
So the case is about incorporating nanocellulose as an additive to the cosmetic products by replacing already existing additive. So that's a short introduction of the case study.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and we also do it in a very interactive way now here. So tailoring, I was mentioning already. So one thing, the cosmetics sector demands different things, and therefore, as you see here in the very top, certain safety assessments are mandatory for the cosmetics case, which is clear to all of us, and therefore they needed to be added to the baseline already. What does that mean? So I advance this slide. So in fact, our colleagues from Ahava basically were modifying the spreadsheet in a way that they included these cost factors here in the baseline as well. Because, sorry, actually, I should be up here as well, because some certain safety assessments need to be done for the baseline too. There is no reach of the market without doing certain safety assessments. Of course, you can do it more extensively in an SSbD scenario. Therefore, you would generate higher cost, of course, for an SSbD impact. So this is one thing that we that this case was very specific about. And then there was lots of discussion on the number of endpoints and the number of alternatives tested in this very early stage. It was also mentioned data collection for simplified LCA, although it is of high value, is sometimes challenging, so hard to get the right data. The number of alternatives, as I was saying earlier, to be screened at lab stage is a very high or interesting SSbD aspect, but it adds a lot to the cost. And there was quite an interesting discussion about that. So for example, if we advance again here, if we have here 8 or 9 or 10 or 15, then we would have a much higher value down there. So we found out that obviously these early screenings have a very cost effective, basically, or cost relevant for what you determine. And this was the question whether this is a kind of calculation. So if we go here once again, the question was if you send something for the OECD toolbox, for example, and does it really then mean that you have a couple of endpoints tested? Then this you have to be tripling or kind of calculating it times 4 or 5 or 6 or something. So this was an observation. And another observation was that cost is, of course, region dependent. And the entries for the probability of technical success and probability of commercial success also very significantly impact the return of investment. And there was lots of insecurity from the group, what value to put in there. Andre, would you like to also express it with your words a little bit? What
yeah, for me, the main conclusion is like this probabilities of success should be related somehow or calculated, maybe not only entered or something, because if we increase the number of alternatives to be compared in the first stage in the gate 3, that should also increase our probability of higher success, and this somehow was in this calculation not included. And when we increase the number of alternatives, it actually decrease our return of investment. So yeah, the huge question is how these probabilities should be related to the number of alternatives that should help us to be more successful.
Okay, and with this we could say that LCA is economically supported, but much more significantly impacted actually by the number of alternatives. What we get on return of investment, the archetype was somewhere in the area between D and A, so a bit more expensive, although being an incremental change, but less expensive than A. Not a very high pull was seen by the Harvard colleagues at least. Yeah. So I hope I have covered a bit also these questions down here. Any other reflections from somebody who was in our group? Please speak up if you want. It was definitely very interesting discussion, this topic. If not, then let's hear to Daniel for the SUNRISE case, please, and give you the floor.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see.
Yes, we can.
Yes. We played with the Excel tool quite a lot, and it was very interesting, and we made some conclusions regarding the role of tailoring. Specifically, we found that SSbD pool is very important because it adds a lot to the return on investment. In any case, shifting the cost from the later gate 5 to the early gate 3 screenings always increased the return of investment. But one interesting outcome is that some of the participants did not fully align with the role of SSbD push and pull as presented in the Excel tool, and this is maybe something interesting that we could discuss further. Regarding the maturity level, in the case of the Laurentia case study, this is intermediate SSbD assessment. Of course, this intermediate SSbD assessment does not remove the need for many additional tests that need to be performed to ensure regulatory compliance in the go-to-market stage. But the opinion of Laurentia is that performing the intermediate SSbD assessment will have a significant role in increasing compliance costs in the later stage by shifting the cost to the earlier stages, which will result in overall increase in the return of investment. The Laurentia case study is very similar to scenario A, but tailoring and modifications are needed. For example, less alternatives should be considered, and the objective of the case study is equally on safety and sustainability. In principle, we discussed that in many scenarios the objectives would be quite mixed, including both safety and sustainability, and technical functionality is always an important objective. So we found that many variations of the archetypical SSbD scenarios are possible, which makes the tailoring extremely important. So for any technology or application, tailoring will be needed, and it will be difficult to establish a small set of, let's say, standard archetypical exposure scenarios. So the tailoring is very important mechanism. It was discussed that the SSbD push does not necessarily decrease the probability of success. According to the Excel sheet, it decreases probability of success. But Lydia from our group thinks the opposite based on discussion with colleagues. And this is probably one thing that we could discuss further in the general discussion. Regarding the technical probability of success and how it affects consumer pool, one important aspect to consider is the acceptance of the performance level by the consumer, because in some cases consumers could be equally satisfied with optimal performance, which is lower than the maximum performance that can be achieved. So the question is, can we factor performance acceptability or acceptance in the calculation of return on investment? It was discussed that the demand for sustainability is a very strong SSbD pool that probably needs to have higher weight in the calculation. So that's it. These are the outcomes of our breakout group. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, and thank you to the SUNRISE team and the case which was provided here. We are now having a small break, and I would say until 3:10 or 3:15, when we reconvene and give the floor to the JRC. So Arantxu will then reflect on what has been accumulating here. Shall we say 3:10, we start again?
I could also say at 3:10. Yeah.
3:10.
1 minute, maybe more, until everyone is here. Where actually it is already 3:10. So you are welcome to start it, and so thank you.
So thank you very much, Beatriz, and thanks a lot, the NSC and the organizers for giving us the opportunity of being here once again discussing this exciting topic that is the SSbD scenarios building. So in my presentation, if I may, and if it works, actually, okay, apparently yes, I want very shortly to recap on what we already introduced in the previous NSC workshop in May, where I use this allegory of the professional mountain climbing as an illustration on how we see the SSbD, its implementation, the scoping analysis and the scenario building. And here very shortly, because then I will further develop, we introduce this illustration where we see and we understand that there are many different scenarios in which we are implementing the SSbD framework, but in any case, that it happens as well when we are doing this exercise of climbing a mountain. We have two very clear things. One is the summit, it's where we want to achieve, that this could be translated in the SSbD context to the common understanding on what we understand when implementing and succeeding on being successful in the implementation of the framework. And we also know when we start with an innovation, because we have an innovation in place, where we are starting from, that it's the base camp, and in our case as well, that we already started developing with the scoping analysis, both in the methodological guidance published last year. And we also mentioned that according to these elements, we were already, it doesn't go as fast as we would like to, because I am trying to move to the next one, but apparently it's not been the case. I don't know whether it was me or you, Beatriz. But
me either. Just give it another try. Just.
Okay, and we also mentioned that building on these elements of the scoping analysis, and of course with an important element among others, that it was the actors' involvement in the life cycle, that we could start exploring how to develop this scenario. So this was very short intro before I go to the real, maybe it's better that you do it, because I am finding it a bit difficult. And what basically what we have done in the context of the revised framework has been to build the narrative and to put into context these elements as well with the SSbD cycle that represents the cycle on how innovation happens in reality. So we started with basically setting this common, if you can go to the next one, this common understanding of what we mean when we are saying that we are applying the framework and that we are trying to implement all these requirements, that now we have defined them in the 4 pillars that you see there. So it's basically that we are considering safety and sustainability aspects through the entire innovation in an iterative and tiered approach as the innovation asks for it. That we are considering the entire SSbD system when we are doing this. And please here, I would like to remind you that we are talking about safety and sustainability, the entire life cycle or SSbD system, and not only this is mirroring in the sustainability assessment. That for that reason, because we are considering safety, sustainability, innovation, entire life cycle, that we need a multidisciplinary engagement and also the actors in life cycle engagement. And in order to understand and to all speak the same language, that we need as well to be transparent in what we are doing and to do it in a trustable manner as well when we are talking about the safety and sustainability assessment. If you go to the next one, This is basically what we have already been talking for several years about the scoping analysis, that in the end, the scoping analysis basically contextualizes the intended innovation, because here I would like as well to make already a distinction about the proposed approach and the SSbD approach. The SSbD, we are talking that already an innovation has been decided to take place, and then it's when we start applying the framework and the scoping analysis, and not the other way around. So basically the scoping analysis contextualized this intended innovation in which the SSbD framework is going to be applied, and it tells us how far or how close our intended innovation is in achieving these principles, these goals that we mentioned before. And we have a set of questions referring to the system, the innovation, the objectives, the kind of active actions that we are going to take in this innovation, which actors are involved, and then as well how transparent we communicate these elements already from the starting point in which we are implementing the framework. So if we go to the next slide, basically, once we have applied the framework, the SSbD scenario represents the outcome from this scoping analysis, from these questions, identifying the first time that we apply the framework, the entry point to the SSbD cycle, and in the different iterations where we are applying as well the scoping, how far we have progressed with regards to the initial point and towards this fulfillment of the principles of the SSbD completeness. If we move to the next one. For that reason, we have, and this is a bit, I was fearing already when we introduced these scenarios in the framework that could be a bit of misunderstanding of what we meant with it. What we introduced in the framework were some kind of different stages with regards to these elements where we could identify our cases, meaning that, for instance, if we were talking about the actors in the life cycle, we could talk about single actor or practitioner being involved in the implementation of the framework, because sometimes we start from a single actor, therefore we might know very much about the life cycle that we represent as, for instance, a formulator, but we assume a lot from this upstream and downstream. So that's the reason why we assume that it's a simplified practitioner, but we could have as well collaborations with other actors in the life cycle, meaning intermediate practitioners or the full practitioner when we are talking about the entire life cycle actors engagement. And so can be as well explained for the knowledge of the system and the innovation or the redesign. And as an outcome, it will give us the situation in which we are implementing a simplified SSbD, intermediate SSbD, or a full SSbD. Here I would like to mention as well that from the simplified to the full, of course, the intermediate allows to a very broad color of a simplified option, so it's not necessarily one that addresses all the different scenarios. And I also wanted to mention that this is an idea of identifying some, as we were saying, elements of the scoping analysis that can help us to allocate our case study in specific situation. But that doesn't mean that, for instance, if we are talking about simplified SSbD implementation, means that we are a single practitioner with a simplified SSbD knowledge and a single innovation taking place. This can be tailored in different ways, as you can see in my next slide. Thank you, Beatriz, where you can be a single practitioner, intermediate system knowledge, because we are already compliant with REACH, and we know that there is a strong collaboration with downstream users, and we know very perfectly how they are using our chemicals, etc., etc. Here, I would also like to mention, based on the discussions that we have had so far, that this is not a way of choosing how I'm going to implement the SSbD. As I was saying before, we have already decided about our innovation, and the scoping analysis and the scenarios help us to identify where we are, and how far and how close we are in achieving the full SSbD goal. So it's not that if I am doing an intermediate SSbD, that's the full end of the SSbD implementation. In order to demonstrate successful SSbD implementation, our ambition is the full SSbD implementation. And if we go to the next one, the idea of this actually identification of the scenarios, and as well the idea of the methodological criteria that we are trying to further develop, is that if you click to the next one, please, that it gives us as well some indications on how, from where we are, we can move forward in order to move as well in the fulfillment of these SSbD principles together, of course. And if we move to the next slide, please, the tailoring of the safety and sustainability assessment, because in the end, the SSbD scenarios represents the outcome from the scoping analysis, identifying the entry point at the beginning, but also as well the entry point to the different iterations of the SSbD cycle, but also allows us to tailor safety and sustainability assessment according to these different scenarios in which we are located. Illustrated as well with this figure that it's not something that you apply once, it's an iterative process that we should apply as progress in the innovation. If we move to the next slide, another illustration of the same idea, you can see here where we have the intended innovation, where we apply the scoping analysis that can help us to identify where we are. Of course, here, in order to illustrate it with the full elements of the scoping analysis and the fulfillment of the SSbD principles, we start from a simplified, then we do the assessment, the tailored assessment according to the situation where we are, we evaluate as well according to that situation, and we move forward in this iterative implementation of the SSbD cycle towards, again, the fulfillment of the SSbD principles. And next slide, please. Of course, there is still a lot to be done. As we were mentioning here, we tried to identify scenarios according to the principles, the scoping analysis, and the starting point of the implementation of the SSbD with this, let's say, high-level approach to the SSbD. But also, of course, there is a need to tailor the safety and sustainability assessment according to the maturity of the implementation of the SSbD, but also the maturity of the innovation and the different circumstances that we can have that are more addressing the specific safety and sustainability assessment. And here I put some examples that we could further elaborate in this context, because of course when we are talking, and it has been already introduced by this case study, we can have as well different type of stakeholders engagement. Here we were talking about the single organization deciding to innovate depending on the product portfolio, and also exploring different connections with life cycle actors that mainly are business to business or business to consumer. But we can have other circumstances when we are talking about consortia, where there might be already some engagement and even some contract agreements in place where this collaboration can be more fluent. We can have as well interactions with the specific stakeholders or with entire life cycle actors in systems where this has been already put in place. The same with sectors applications. It was as well already introduced by Wendell that there can be different sectors stages, but also sector applications which are more demanding or less. This push that we were talking about in our discussions, depending on what sector we are talking about. Of course, we haven't entered into too much detail on the discussion when we talk about chemicals and materials and the granularity that can happen or take place in these discussions, and how easy can be in some cases to apply. For instance, we have been discussing NAMs or SCREAMs hazard assessment or SCREAM sustainability assessment, what might be more challenging when we are talking about materials, etc., etc. And then something that we have already started exploring, but that could be as well further explored, is the kind of innovation that we are talking about. That, of course, it's very much focused sometimes on molecular design, but there are other innovations that can take place at process product design, breakthrough, incremental, etc., etc. So this is an idea on what is the direction where I particularly see that we should continue developing scenarios. And I think that with this was my last slide, if I am correct. I would like to thank you very much and open to questions that I might have forget to mention.
Any questions?
I guess that it was very clear. Something that we have been discussing as well before is that in our breakout discussion is that, of course, and going back again to the many different scenarios and cases in which the SSbD can be implemented. For me, there are some key aspects that we should reflect on, and following this principle that we are talking about, being transparent as well, be transparent on how these scenarios are built. Because, and we discussed as well already in the first workshop, that we should be clear for whom and with what aim we are developing these scenarios. In the case of the ones that we were discussing today, for instance, in our group, there were a lot of discussions because some people doesn't come from industry and doesn't understand the PSA. So to make it clear that in this case, for instance, a scenario is built for a specific kind of industry with a specific portfolio where they have different innovation opportunities, and there is a need to convince the CEO that our innovation is the one that should continue being developed. The same should be done for all the scenarios that we are building. We use or spend a lot of our efforts and resources in developing this common understanding, and the ideal would be that according to these already kind of scenarios, or with the scoping elements that identify the position with regards to the fulfillment of the SSbD, we have created a common language, a common understanding, and a common as well implementation of the framework, that whenever we do develop newer scenarios, we could as well link to it, identified where are the similarities and where we are deviating from them. So it's as well easier when we are discussing that we are all still speaking the same language.
Wendell, you have raised up your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I think we need to discuss this point of disagreement that we know we have, that in the graphic that you use to illustrate the process, you put the full SSbD on the top of the mountain as the final goal. A company would put a product that earns money at the top of the mountain. And we need to somehow combine the two. This is what we try by offering a description of a scenario that looks both at the scoping and at the economic context. So I think the cases we have seen demonstrate that we don't always have the resources to look at all aspects of each individual innovation. And we need to prioritize the existing resources onto the most critical cases. And this is what we try to do by this, in my interpretation of a scenario, to focus the attention. But then, do I get you right that you would always want to see at some point the full assessment of all aspects? Iranzu.
Okay, there are some other colleagues of mine here that could as well answer these questions because it's not something personal here. Of course, I am talking on behalf of the GRC and also the ambition that we have built in the context of the SSbD. You are asking as a company with, again, it's what I was saying, we also need to consider that this ambition should be used for all kind of innovations that happen in the context of chemicals, materials, and their life cycles. Of course, there are different cases, and there are, and for that as well, we need to consider how we are applying the framework and in which context, and what we can achieve. I am only saying that when we are talking about compliance with SSbD and compliance with the ambitions of SSbD, that in the end is to ensure that whatever we put on the market is safe and sustainable by design, considering the entire life cycle. For that, we need the full SSbD fulfillment of the principles, and this is the ambition. Okay. And this is the ambition as well if you are considering to place that. I mean, I find it a bit sometimes challenging the question because as well, when you were presenting before, I wanted to understand some of the scenarios that you put and the difference between doing an innovation and considering rates compliance versus doing an innovation that in addition to that, you are implementing the SSbD framework. You are innovating regardless of whether you apply the framework. So why there are some more resources allocated when you apply the framework than when you know to the innovation? It's something that I don't understand, because in the end, you will have to comply as well with these regulatory requirements. So what we are saying is that the fulfillment of the SSbD in reality is moving towards this compliance that you will need to fulfill once you put your solution on the market. So the difference...
This is a more fundamental debate, but in my perception, REACH is still tonnage triggered. So we don't have the same requirements for all sorts of innovations. Plus, in many cases, an innovation goes into an existing substance where for changing formulations, for instance, the example from Budenheim today would not necessarily require a different REACH dossier. So, and if, as long as SSbD is not mandatory, there needs to be an additional value to motivate people to do it. Things change completely if you make it mandatory, but that's not currently the case.
And also, I think it's important to reflect that in the beginning, we don't need to look at everything.
But this is as well the point. We are understanding that you need to look to all the details. But what we are, I mean, what you need to understand is that you need to have the entire picture, not in the entire detail, but at least the entire picture. The holistic view of safety and sustainability aspects.
Yes, but then if you are saying we always need to do a full assessment, it's to go in depth in all the endpoints and all the life cycle assessments for the entire. For example, for us, it's very difficult to do a complete life cycle assessment. We don't know what's happening downstream. And so it needs to, I think we need, if the ambition is to have this being used by companies, and if it's not mandatory, so it needs to be something that can be uptaken. And as it is now, it's very difficult. So the idea here is to come to a compromise between, because it cannot be, in the ideal world, I also agree, we should look at everything and guarantee everything. I'm up to that for sure. But then when you go into practice and you try to put this in place in a company, the struggles are many, and you are not helping to make it easier, because it's bringing more complexity now. All these SSbD practitioners, SSbD cycles, SSbD. So it's increasing on the complexity of terminology, on things that I think can be, if the ambition, as I heard from in the SSbD bootcamp, from the GRTD, that the ambition is that companies use them. I mean, if it is to use, because it's not mandatory, if we don't do some simplification, we cannot, it's not a reality, I would say, unless we get extra money fund to do that. But I think it's important to reflect on this. Otherwise, we take the risk of
maybe
just being used in EU projects.
I will reply before I see Hubert, because actually I think that at least myself, and then we can debate this as well. Maybe it might be a debate with my colleagues internally. I never mention assessment. I always mention considerations. That for me, that's the important, considering all the big picture. So that when you are innovating, you don't consider only in which you are innovating, but also where it comes from and where it's going. So you have the entire picture where your innovation can affect with regards to safety and sustainability. We are not talking about doing the full assessment. And then with regards to the sustainability, you might know better than me where these requirements come from doing the full LCA. So I'm not going to debate on that. But what at least the way that I see when we are talking about this fulfillment of the principles is very clear. And it's not other than considering safety and sustainability aspects. I never talk about assessment throughout the entire innovation, not only at the end, and together safety and sustainability, not as it has been done so far that first I look at the functionality, then I look at safety, and at the end I do sustainability. There are some aspects that we already can identify when we are innovating, and that we have the consideration of the entire life cycle system. So we know that we are innovating may affect downstream, so we don't have to forget that our improvement with regards to safety and sustainability might not be the same for the improvement downstream or upstream. So these are the things that need to be considered, and when we are talking about the full SSbD, this is for me what needs to be considered. Again, as I said, the assessment, it's another thing. But I will let Hubert, that has the hand raised, to maybe add on that.
Massimo was first, I think.
Thank you, Hubert. Yeah, a short comment from, say, the industrial and servicing point of view towards industry. I would like to pick a very important word that has been said before, risk. Okay, so when we promote services for ESG, according to the CSRD, and other services of that kind to companies, manufacturing companies of different sectors, the parallel I always made is this one, ISO 9001, many years ago. Okay, companies were perceiving this as an extra burden. Well, this indeed generated business resilience for the companies, because the ones who believed in that and implemented it at the right size and in the right way had a much better management internally. So what we are talking with ESG is not so different. It's open up, of course, the dimension we have to consider in a company analysis. And more or less in parallel, when we are developing a new material, new products, we take a risk. The risk is that one day the product will not be commercialized anymore because some regulation will put in place to safeguard end users and the environment. So by applying SSbD, we may reduce the risk of R&D or innovation and implementation. I don't enter into the details of cost. Of course, I totally agree with Wendell and Carla. There are costs to be faced. We have to find somehow the sources for funding this activity. There are different approaches, different tier levels that may allow us to achieve and to approach the problem. But just starting with the right step by considering in a holistic perspective all the other variables, it's already a very good exercise to reduce the risk of implementation. So in my perception, this is the way to go. Of course, we have to develop maybe better tools, better approaches to operationalize it. but this is necessary to reduce the risk of implementation. And this is very well known for nanotechnologies. So nanotechnologies are not very much uptaken by industry in every sectors because there is a big risk. So lack of regulations, but sometimes of lack of knowledge on the impact. So why should I take the risk if I'm a small medium enterprise to put money for research, develop new very performant products, but with some risk behind it? So a risk is a key word in my point of view that should be, of course, addressed in the right way with the right tools and methodologies, but we cannot skip it as a good business plan for innovation.
Thank you, Massimo.
Okay.
The next hand is from Hubert.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yes, to all this, I would like to offer another observation or something, a reflection that I think we are mixing some things that we should be really aware that should be separated. And the one thing that we are mixing is the SSbD framework itself and the economic profit. I mean, both are very different things. It is, of course, the very interest of every company to make profit, to have economic viability, and so on. This is very clear. On the other hand, SSbD framework includes the framework itself does not include any consideration of economic profit, because it is these principles that are there. The 5 different parts that we have here. This is the SSbD framework itself. And then, of course, this has to be understood, the framework itself. And then, of course, the company can then, when it implements the framework, have this kind of economic considerations, but they are not part of the framework itself. Economic, let's say, benefit, gain, cannot be the goal of applying the SSbD framework. I think it was one of the first slides that one goal could be economic improvement. This is not part of SSbD. Both of the two things, SSbD and economic profit, are things that have a right in itself, of course, but they should not be mixed. It is the SSbD framework on the one hand, and its implementation by the SSbD practitioner, by the company, by the consortium, that is the other thing. So this is kind of one reflection I wanted to say. And another point, if I may, it seems that in some cases, the SSbD approach seems to be a one-off exercise, presented as a one-off exercise, but this is not the case. In the beginning, I think it was presented as a decision, doing SSbD approach as a decision tool, whether to move from the ideation or from the business case stage to do this project. But this is only the beginning. So in a SSbD approach, one has to do, or one should do, these considerations repeatedly along as the innovation becomes more mature. So this is this iterative nature. This is sometimes a bit forgotten, but this is something that should be kept in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. The next one is Lydia Ceriani.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. Lydia Ceriani from Merck Life Science. I want indeed to reiterate that I think that it's good that SSbD it's not mandatory, it's flexible, because we can have indeed these tailored evaluations. And if we know that a product will become a top seller, we can have a full SSbD evaluation for sure. For products that in our business are sold only in micrograms, there's no need. A simplified SSbD, perhaps it's the viable solution. But I fully agree with the Jersey, also with the comment of Massimo that SSbD should stay. We should have it in the innovation, because Also, sustainability data really becoming a must-have. Customers are asking us for data. Investors are asking for sustainability. We need to have sustainable products. So with this flexible nature, I think that SSbD is a must-have. So we should find a way of implementing it in all companies, ideally. So thank you.
You're muted, Beatrice, but you mentioned
Yes,
me.
thank you. Yes, perfectly. You read.
I actually had another question to Iranzu on the presentation. So if Wendell wants to reflect first on this, please go ahead, Wendell.
Shall I share a specific slide, Wendell, about that? Sorry. If you were asking about
I wanted
one
to
of the
ask whether
slides.
Wendell wants to reflect first on this discussion, because I have another discussion issue to bring up.
Then I'll reflect on that shortly. First to Hubert, of course it's iterative, and that is exactly what you see in the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet makes a plan for SSbD activities in the lab phase. And again, if the project proceeds to pilot phase, in pilot phase, and again, if the project gets there, in launch phase. So that is entirely reflected in the spreadsheet. And that is exactly what you say, and it's an iterative approach. But still, at the beginning, before you start the project, you want to know if you have all the resources on board to come to the end. You do the same for the upscale activities, which also iteratively are planned in the project plan. And this is absolutely essential, that you don't start a project where you don't have a chance to bring it to the end, to launch. And that is the routine. I mean, this is just good management to know where you invest your resources. And so we need to know at the beginning how much cost will have to be budgeted for SSbD type activities. And to Massimo, this is exactly mirrored in the different cases. We saw in the cosmetics case from Ahava that you will never make it to market if you don't do all the early safety screenings. They invest more money into safety screenings in lab phase than into technical development. That's an example where you may not agree. I would call this a best practice of SSbD implementation, because the entire competitors do the same thing. You cannot bring it to the market without that. And so we see this already, that when it makes sense, companies do these screenings, but only where it makes sense, where you can use it to differentiate against competitors. Because in the end, Iranzu, you say that, or Hubert, you said it shouldn't be mixed. But if SSbD is something that shall guide innovation, then it's necessarily something done in an economic context, because it's done in companies, not at universities. So we need to consider these boundary conditions. There's no way around it.
May I reply to Wendell? So I think that it's a good point, Wendell, but if you want also to avoid the failure of your product, you need to assess the safety, the sustainability, because they are really now, it's a kind of requirement. So, and also for the hazard classification of a product, you really need to check the hazard of all, all the hazard properties of a chemical. So you really need to assess these properties. So it's not that you add in another layer to, the basic work that you're already conducting. I don't know if you got my point. So this kind of evaluations, for instance, in our company, we're already running hazard and sustainability evaluations for our products. For sure, we need perhaps to increase the, how we are conducting them, but they're already part of the process in order to avoid the failure of a product, the failure of a project. So I don't see it as an extra burden, this is SSbD work package, as we are calling it in the calculator file.
But then I don't get it. Do you perform a cancerogenicity study for each product?
No, but at least
so you are selecting, you're tailoring. That's the point.
We are assessing those kind of endpoints with the new approach methodology. So we are trying to identify this concern, but for sure we are not running a carcinogenicity test because we are not submitting it for a REACH registration. So we are not performing all this kind of tests, and we will not be doing for all the products for sure. This is totally unfeasible in general, unless you apply for a REACH registration. I don't know if you got my point.
Yeah, but I think this is what we are mentioning with some tailoring, is the fact that you don't need to look at everything always. There are things that are not so relevant, you don't spend money. And that is the thing that I think, Wendell, at least...
No, I fully agree on the tailoring, totally.
This is the thing that it could be somehow added, some flexibility on the things to look at, depending on type of product, on market. This would facilitate a bit, at least in the industry, not by us. I think we all in this call agree it's something to go on, it's fine. But then the other thing is when we talk with people that don't think the same way, and so we need to have these arguments to somehow convince and have things implemented. And that is what we are trying to extract with this approach. It's not something to ban, no, not ever, but somehow to facilitate the storytelling, to then facilitate the uptake. So this is more, I think, where this thing comes from.
Okay. Ranzo?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment something, and I don't know whether we could continue discussing, but I also want to hear from Wouter what is his question. I think that maybe we are making it a discussion, and for me, what we should is be clear. And as I was saying before, we spend a lot of our resources trying to clarify some concepts where we all can agree that it's this common understanding. And the only thing that for me it's necessary is, as we said, to be transparent and to be to maintain the traceability of what we do. If there is a need to put as an argument some things that for certain stakeholders are valid but for others not, it's what I was saying, it's that we need to be transparent in how we approach it and speak the same language. For instance, when we are discussing about this economic value, okay, this is not part of the SSbD, it is part of innovation. So we also need to differentiate that, and we acknowledge that when we talk about this SSbD as well, that might be trade-offs that are not related to safety and sustainability, but to other aspects of innovation like functionality, economics aspects, etc., etc. We need to be transparent on that. We need to be transparent as well on the sense that when we are talking about the scoping, what it means and what it doesn't mean, if we want to translate it to something different, to be transparent on how we are doing that. If we are including economic aspects as well, to be transparent, and as well to be transparent with the safety and sustainability as assessment or considerations. If we are considering to do a simplified where we are only considering these aspects and not really assessing, to be transparent as well with what we have done and where we have achieved. What we have achieved and what are the questions and the uncertainty related to this assessment that they still need to address. So the key is here to be transparent and to be trustable, and to be as well acknowledge that our case is not the only case that exists when we are implementing the framework. It might be relevant for you or for this group to discuss economic aspects. In some other cases, this is not needed. So can we talk about the same language and then, of course, build the scenarios according to the needs, our needs but this would be for me the point. All the cases are valid. There is not right or wrong, and we don't have to agree or disagree. But let's talk the same language, so at least we have this as a baseline. And then we might have the discussion about simplify intermediate, but there as well, we have some stakeholders that are calling for certifications and things like that. Where do we put as well the balance there? Because if you want a certificate, you cannot choose whether you do intermediate, you understand, no? So, but for me, it's more, let's transparent, keep it traceable.
Yeah, but that is a different thing. That is if it becomes a certification scheme or if it becomes regulatory, then it changes things, no? I think now it's to see, okay, something that's voluntary, how we do to implement this in industry. And for that, at this point, we need to do some tailoring. So we will do that. I mean, at Science Co, we do that, and we all do that. So this will continue because it's impossible to do, and we will keep the principles in mind, but principles in mind without an assessment, it says very little because you may think, oh yeah, I think about this, but then you need to prove how things go, no? But this is more the side of the reality now that it's going to be like this, but it's also not it's not mandatory. So I think it can also serve as a guidance and we can implement it in our practices as it works at this moment, right? Because we don't have to reply to, and so I think that's what we companies can do and try to implement it the way they can. That's what at least we are trying.
Thank you, Carla. Shall now we go to the Bautas question?
No, I'm happy to withdraw my question. I'll send it via email to Ransu and who, but it's on the JRC revised framework. And I'm mindful of time. I think we need to stop soon.
So I have a comment and questions that I'm just curious to understand how industry works. For example, in the archetypal scenarios in the PDF of planets, I'm very curious if the industry buys liabilities, because when I did the PhD it was in Chemi Business School and it was all about insurance, and this is what Massimo reminded me about the risk. So my question about the archetypal scenarios and the economic benefit for the industries of applying the vision of SSbD, I'm curious if each product has a specific profile when it comes to risk, like product liability, environmental liability, or occupational liability, and if a new archetypal scenario could be based on the profile because if new innovative materials enter the market, which is something I don't know, and the tonnage is not high as to go through the entire REACH regulation, could the SSbD be an incentive for those insurance prices to go down? I know it's a bit far-fetched and could be probably outside the scope of our discussion, but I was trying to merge the vision of SSbD with some economic incentives to the selection.
Shall I reply to this? Irini, the insurance policy is sold to the company as a whole, not to individual products. I was involved in discussions with our insurer and the reinsurance company of that insurer concerning nanotechnology 10 years ago. And they wanted to know if, as a whole, a new technology adds to the risk profile. But they don't look at individual products. And it's a very high level discussion. It's not down to individual materials, products, and applications. And of course, you're right. If a company starts a very risky business, then insurance is an issue. But it's not like we're starting from scratch. It's an existing system, and starting into a new type of technology or stopping one will change the insurance policies. But it's already a risk that is being managed by the insurance system.
May I shortly comment on this?
Massimo?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, not specifically referring to insurance system, but data are quite clear. Companies that go for ESG, environmental social governance, so they make eco-design of their products and the management of their company according to ESG principles are better performing and get better funding by funding institutions. So this is quite clearly expressed by papers, by data. So it's of course a competitive advantage. It's not for single products, but if you produce eco-design for your products, if you go that way, you are more aligned to ESG principles and you will get better funding and credit. This could be extended to the concept of SSbD. I mean, if you want really to monetize this approach. But still, I get back to Hubert's point that it's not about economic. I'm aligned with the vendor. When you are designing an innovation process, you need to budget, so to account for cost. Maybe it's difficult to get a clear vision of the return on investment if you do or you don't do SSbD. This is for sure difficult, I think. But if you do SSbD, you are aligned with those principles of also extended product responsibility. So producers now are called for extended responsibility of the life cycles of their products. In some sectors, it's compulsory, and in others, it's getting more and more important.
Thank you so much,
thanks
Massimo.
for all the.
Yeah, I think we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce that Leah is now going to wrap it up. Thanks for all the contributions. It was really highly valuable work, I would like to say, and everything is captured and we will further use that. And Leah is now going to say how we're gonna proceed.
Yeah, I think I had maybe the one last slide, Beatrice, but I can just do it with words. I think these are excellent discussions. I think this is really, we're trying to get a common language. We heard today also discussions on tiered and how do we really support that. So in the first workshop, we really tried to sort of, couple the scoping analysis with the business case. The next one, Beatrice. Next one, just go click, 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 and really play with how do we integrate and when do we integrate these assessments. So now in the next workshop, what we're trying to explore is that you have a particular budget and how do you do these tiered approaches? What kind of strategies can you do? What kind of safety assessments? So really going into, if you have a high maturity or mid maturity, how do you do this? So that's we're going to explore in several workshops, because as you can see with this discussion, this tiered mindset it's really key. And how do you invest the money that you have for R&D and SSbD as a work package in your innovation? So please stay tuned, because we're really working on how do we combine and have these sort of strategies that we can share. And we really want to thank you for all these great discussions, because really this is how we move further the field. And I think that's it. We look forward to having you in our next workshop around May. And I think we can close, right, Wendell? You want to say the last words, Wendell? Perfect. Have a wonderful holiday. I think we'll have everything in Zenodo, right, Beatrice?
Yes.
And if you have any questions, please contact us at any time. Walter, if you have questions or also improvements in our comments. I had a Menti session, but the discussion was too good to stop it, because I think this is how we make progress. So I really want to thank you for all your time, and we look forward to seeing you in our third workshop, where we're going to have further discussions on how do we do this SSbD tiered approach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.